The church's traditional ecology seems to me to be based on Genesis, where God gave dominion over the world to the human race.
God has entrusted the creation to us. It's not ours, it's God's. But nevertheless, we are the stewards of that creation.
The church has a very long history of caring for the environment. It's not well known.
With the Industrial Revolution and so on, social problems became uppermost in the minds of church people. And the environment tended to get neglected, as it did in the rest of society.
What's new with Pope Francis is that he's brought the church into the question of climate change. The church is now taking a position on man-made climate change to say, yes, it's happening, and we need to act to prevent it.
There's no doubt that the climate is altering. The question is why and what the rational thing is to do about it. If you look back at the Gospels and the narrative of Christ's presence on earth, you will recognise that the environment in which he lived was actually unspoiled. There they were, fig trees and olive trees everywhere. The cedars were still there in Lebanon. The waters of the Jordan were flowing in such a pure way that you could baptise people in it.
The church was very concerned that human beings saw, for example, the Garden of Eden as the place where we were at one with creation, we were in harmony with creation. And the Desert Fathers, for example, wanted to, by their lives, reconstruct what it was like to be in Eden by their treatment of wild creatures. There were lots of lovely legends about how they and the wild creatures, the lions, for example, would befriend them and they would help them out and everything would be just as it was in the Garden of Eden. They're very concerned to show that to be a true Christian was to be someone who lived as if the fall had never happened.
If you look at the whole Benedictine tradition, the whole day is structured in such a way that you think about creation and caring for creation and honoring God and thanking God and doing his work.
For a medieval lord, there were rights, but there were also responsibilities. In theory, at least, a lord should look after his subjects. And so any theory of domination of the world also at that time carried the implications that exploitation was paired with stewardship, if you like.
The time of St. Francis of Assisi, there was great concern for nature and creation and seeing everything as kin. We are brothers and sisters with all of creation because we have one Father God. We've lost sight of a lot of that. It's been marginalised. The environment has been seen as yet another resource that we can make use of.
The environmental movement, as we have inherited it, grew up really during the 19th century as very much a religious movement. And people like Ruskin and Wordsworth, who wrote quite passionately against the effects of the Industrial Revolution on not only on the natural environment of our country, but also on the towns and the way people live. They were writing as environmentalists.
The particular form of the Industrial Revolution, for instance, it's based on carbon, it's based on coal, it polluted the atmosphere in a huge way over 200 years. A theology of dealing with that was an urgent priority, and you could see it emerging during the 20th century. And now it's really urgent. We are in a world where we are, as a species, responsible for destruction of our own environment. The Church now has to cope with that fact.
I think Christians, by showing that they care for the environment, are actually making a very important statement, not just about their vision for the world, but about what it is that drives their vision for the world. And it seems to me that there's a very important opportunity for witness here, that belief in God does make a difference. That actually gives you a fresh vision of the world, which is laden with transformative impact for the environment. It's not just the individual actions that matter, it's the vision of reality that drives it.
Secular people tend to think of the earth as a means to the end of human uses, whereas religious people tend to see the earth and the universe as, like everything, as an end in itself, since it was created and not just discovered. So a religious person would say, you should think of it as you would a work of art. What does it mean? Not what is the use of it.
In our Eucharist, for example, we bring elements of creation to God, and we see those elements redeemed in the sacrifice of Jesus on the altar. People of no religion, they miss that dimension. They miss the ultimate motivation, which is that what they're doing in helping the environment is giving glory back to God, giving praise to God in their actions.
With some deep green environmentalists, human beings are the worm in the apple. But for a Catholic, for a Christian, the context is that human beings aren't the worm in the apple. We're beautiful as well, but we all have to learn how to live within the context of all God's creation.
I think it has been a rather self-centered approach on the part of the industrialized world. How bad will it be for us now? We won't have any petrol if we use it all up. How bad will it be if the climate changes? But I have not thought about the creation as having itself an intrinsic value, or animals themselves have an intrinsic value that deserves respect.
We're talking here of God's creation, and this is a creation we're talking about. And animals are part of God's creation. And animals we have a particular involvement with because of our scientific knowledge now. We do affect the natural world in ways that wasn't the case a long time ago. We have the capacity as humans now to even destroy the natural world. And in many aspects we are doing. So we need to go back to our basic of creation, that we are responsible and we're given by God responsibility for looking after creation, and that includes animals.
Both John Paul II and of course Benedict have spoken about the environment, and both of them have reminded us that we must show solidarity, not with other creatures, but especially also with the poor, because what we do to the environment affects all of us, and it affects in particularly the poorer people, actually, what we do to the environment.
Here we have the church, saying, actually, this is a concern which is absolutely at the heart of who we are as Catholics. Francis is starting above all from the point of view of the poor. He always speaks from the point of view of the poor. And of course, the people who have suffered most from climate change and carbon emissions have precisely been in the developing world. He has some very moving passages about rivers which used to teem with fish which are now dead as a result of industrial pollution. Whole populations' livelihoods depend often on the state of the planet. We all have a duty to care for it, and we're all in this together. And I think this is where the Holy See and the Pope can act and speak with a kind of authority at a global level which no other leader on this earth can.
Il rispetto del creato è un'esigenza della nostra fede. Il giardino in cui viviamo non ci è affidato perché lo sfruttiamo, ma perché lo coltiviamo e lo custodiamo con rispetto.
The Vatican is the world's first carbon neutral state. And I think Francis, that happened under Pope Benedict, Francis wants that to be an example. He wants Catholics to be the people who are conspicuous, not just for eating fish on Fridays, but for recycling. And I think we're talking here not just about an advocacy and the Pope seeking to use his authority and the Church's authority to influence nations, but also to mobilise the Church worldwide.
Most people perhaps are seeing climate change as a scientific issue, they're seeing it as a policy issue. They haven't yet connected it to their personal beliefs about their world, their responsibility to their world, their responsibility to their church, to their God, and so forth. And that's a very powerful motivating force if you can get people to think in those terms.
How many parishes worry about their immediate environment? How many of them do environmental audits and check on whether the lighting is the most ecologically efficient, whether they need to have pilgrimages that use aeroplane transport, and make sure that even in our own little world of our homes, our families, our schools, our parishes, to see that we're doing our bit for the environment. And I think what Pope Francis does is he's putting the message back into our hands and saying it's not people in power who are the ones who are going to change the world. It's everybody out there. It's all the people. And let's empower the poor, and that means all of us.
For a pope to have the name Francis immediately to the normal layperson out there gives straight away a memory of St. Francis of Assisi, and that gives us a clear demonstration. Oh yes, St. Francis, he was animal lover. So the church has got an animal lover called Francis, and they make a connection, even if only at that level.
So one of the most interesting ideas of Pope Francis's teaching on ecology is the idea of an integral ecology, that actually the grammar of creation needs to be respected, both in terms of the natural world, but also in terms of human relationships. So I think what he's doing here is in a very Francis way, bringing together, if you like, a progressive agenda and a conservative agenda, concern about, for example, same-sex marriage, same-sex adoption. He's bringing these two together and saying, if we care that there is a divine design, if we believe that actually not everything we do is licit because of the impact that it has on our planet, then we need to have that same awareness also in our understanding, for example, of male-female complementarity or the needs of children.
Nel nostro tempo il matrimonio e la famiglia sono in crisi. La crisi della famiglia ha dato origine a una crisi di ecologia umana, poiché gli ambienti sociali, come gli ambienti naturali, hanno bisogno di essere protetti, anche se l'umanità ha ora compreso la necessità di affrontare ciò che costituisce una minaccia per i nostri ambienti naturali. Siamo lenti, ma siamo lenti nella nostra cultura, anche nella nostra cultura cattolica. Siamo lenti nel riconoscere che anche i nostri ambienti sociali sono a rischio. È quindi indispensabile promuovere una nuova ecologia umana e farla andare avanti. Fare quello che possiamo perché tutti abbiano da mangiare, ma anche ricordare ai potenti della terra che Dio li chiamerà a giudizio un giorno e si manifesterà se davvero hanno cercato di provvedere il cibo per Lui in ogni persona e se hanno operato perché l'ambiente non sia distrutto ma possa produrre questo cibo.
A lot of people have been nervous about this encyclical because they see in it, and they're not wrong, a critique of contemporary market capitalism. Yeah, they see it as a critique of a certain model of consumerism. And I think there are people who are invested in that model who believe that actually, we need more market capitalism and more consumerism, not less. And therefore they detect behind the Pope's critique a socialist agenda or an agenda which doesn't properly understand market economics. I think they're wrong. And I think with this ecology encyclical, he's offering a challenge to some people, particularly in the United States, who have, I think, probably for too long put too much faith in the workings of liberal capitalism, of market capitalism.
Each of us has a little sphere where he can make a mess or clean up after himself. You do try and make sure that the world around you is not adversely affected by you being there.
At least for those of us who are privileged at the top of the economic pyramid, we just vastly overconsume. And that doesn't have to be something where somebody has to have any scientific knowledge. You get a sense in your gut very quickly that, you know what, I own too many cars and I drive around too much and I just eat too much food. So I think if people just paid attention to what their consciences are telling them, they'd move in a different direction.
One area in which Christians can make a difference is this very strong sense that we can give things up. What is there we can do as an act of sacrifice that's also an act of witness and is also good for our environment?
For instance, you can do good by not using a motor car unless you absolutely have to. You can do good by supporting traditional methods of farming. You can do good by making sure that the animals which you eat are properly reared. You can do good in all these individual ways. They're often quite costly, either in time or money, but they're good things that you do.
Jesus started with 12 people in a Roman Empire, and he caused mighty changes throughout the world. And even in our own worlds, if we change our lives, each individual changes his or her own life, little by little, we will make a difference.